What if everything you've been told about breakups, loss, and getting someone back is wrong? What if silence, not action, is your strongest move? Right now, you may feel a pull inside you, a desperate urge to text them, to explain yourself, to fight for what's slipping through your fingers. But stop. What if I told you that doing nothing at all, not reacting, not explaining, not chasing, is the most powerful stoic move you could ever make? That by simply stepping back and saying absolutely nothing, you become unforgettable. Sounds counterintuitive, right? That's the point. Most people act from fear after being left. They panic, they cling, they beg, but that's exactly what's expected. And the moment you behave like every other broken soul, they win. They hold the power, but not you, not anymore. Because you're here to break that pattern. You're here to shift the power back in your direction. Let's face it, modern advice on relationships is filled with noise. Send this text. Make them jealous. Post your glow up. All surface level games, all rooted in insecurity. But what if you discovered a deeper truth, one rooted in self-discipline, emotional control, and inner strength? What if you adopted the mindset of the Stoics, men who faced death, exile, betrayal, yet never folded under pressure? This is Stoicism. This is Stoic Relationships. And today, we're going to flip the script. No more chasing, no more waiting, no more wondering if they'll come back. This is about you taking your power back through radical emotional detachment, through stillness, through silence. You might be wondering, but won't they forget about me? Or, doesn't no contact just make me look like I don't care? The answer? Only if you're still seeking validation, but when you stop caring whether they notice, they always do. The moment you reclaim your energy, they feel it. Not because you said something, but because you didn't. Because your absence became louder than your presence ever was. That's the paradox of true influence. It flows not from force, but from presence. And when you master that, you become what they never expected: untouchable. If you've ever been broken, left behind, or ghosted, this message is for you. You're not here to win them back. You're here to win yourself back. And as you rise, you'll realize they didn't break you, they freed you. But first, we have to go to the place it hurts the most, the point of loss. Then we'll walk through the fire. And if you stay until the end, I promise you'll never look at heartbreak the same way again. Stick around. What comes next will shake everything you thought you knew. 1. The fall, accepting the pain without resistance. The moment they walk away, everything shifts. The world doesn't feel quite real anymore, does it? It's like the ground beneath you collapses and you're left standing in the wreckage of a life you thought you were building together. 1 second, you were sharing plans, laughter, touch, and the next you're alone, reeling in silence, staring into the void they left behind. You don't remember the last words exactly, or maybe you remember them too clearly. I need space. It's not you, it's me. I just don't feel it anymore. Whatever version you heard, it hit like a blade, and now it's lodged somewhere between your ribs, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. And as painful as that is, you must know. This is where it begins. This is where the fall becomes your foundation. The emotions that consume you now, grief, confusion, humiliation, rage, these are not weaknesses. They are not signs of failure. They are signs that you loved with depth, that you hoped, that you risked. But here is the truth they never told you. Pain is not something to resist. It is not your enemy. It is your greatest teacher. It is the messenger of truth. And when it arrives, your only task is to listen. Feel it without shame. Acknowledge every thought that comes. Why wasn't I enough? Was I too much? Will they regret it? You might ask these questions 100 times in a day. Let them come. Let them pass, but don't act on them. Don't send that message. Don't call. Don't explain. Not because you're trying to play games, but because you are taking the first step toward mastery. In Stoicism, the first virtue is control over impulse. Right now, your emotions want to take the wheel, but what if you didn't let them? What if, instead of trying to change their mind, you used this moment to observe your own? Think about this. What if your need to understand why they left is actually just your way of avoiding the discomfort of being left? What if closure isn't something they give you, but something you decide to create, silently, internally, without their participation? That's the first Stoic truth. You are not entitled to explanations. You are only responsible for your response. And this is where most people break. They scramble, they spiral, they fall into the trap of needing to be seen, heard, validated by the very person who just chose to walk away. But that desperation, that is the energy of someone who has not yet remembered who they are. And you are not here to beg for attention. You are here to remember your strength. Every great transformation in Stoicism begins with suffering. It's in the fire that we forge steel. The strongest Roman generals, the fiercest philosophers, they were not born from ease. They were made through abandonment, betrayal, defeat. What made them different was not the pain they experienced, but how they used it. So ask yourself, what will you do with your pain? Will you drown in it, or will you learn to breathe beneath it? Will you let it shape you into someone bitter or into someone unbreakable? Because make no mistake, this is your test. Not from them, but from life itself, from the universe, from the part of you that has waited in silence for a moment, like this to awaken. And it starts here, not with pretending it doesn't hurt, not with faking a smile, but by owning every shard of your brokenness and choosing to walk forward anyway. And no, you don't have to move on today. That's not the goal. The goal is not to heal overnight. The goal is to face what is real and stop fighting it. The fall is not your failure. The fall is where you find what you're made of. Most people panic during this phase. They watch stories. They obsess over what their ex is doing. They stalk every post for clues. But in Stoic relationships, you stop giving your energy to ghosts. You reclaim your attention, because attention is power, and you don't give power to someone who chose to leave. You start by doing something radical in today's world. You do nothing. You sit with the pain, you breathe, you journal, you hit the gym, you read, you work, and most importantly, you stay silent. Because your silence is not just absence, it is presence. It is a mirror they did not expect to look into. And what does that silence reflect? It reflects that you are not who they thought you were. You are not the weak man or woman they imagined would collapse in their absence. You are not defined by their departure. In fact, the moment they left, they gave you the opportunity to become something greater than you ever were with them. That's not some cheesy line. That's raw truth. Think back. How often did you minimize yourself to keep the peace? How many times did you bend, fold, dilute your needs, silence your truth to avoid rocking the boat? Their leaving is not the ending, it is the removal of a limitation. But only if you treat it as such. Otherwise, this moment will define you in the worst way. It will break you. But if you rise, if you feel it without feeding it, if you sit in the fire and choose not to scream, you become untouchable. That's what they don't see coming. That's what Stoicism teaches us, not the suppression of pain, but the transmutation of it. Your ability to hold your pain without acting on it is your strength, your power, your edge. And when you learn to hold yourself like that, without external reassurance, without needing them to come back, you become something rare, something magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because you are being real in a world full of reaction. They expect you to fold, to break, to crawl back. And in that expectation lies their comfort. But the moment you don't react, you shake their reality. you become a question they can't answer. And the human mind, it hates unanswered questions. This is why doing nothing is not passive. It's active detachment. It's a message delivered without a word. A man or woman who can sit in silence is far more powerful than someone who screams into the void. This is the first doorway in Stoic relationships, entering the pain without needing to change it, accepting the fall without reaching for a rope. Because if you reach for a rope too soon, you never learn to land on your own 2 feet, and your feet, that's where your power stands. If you want to rise, you must first let yourself fall, fully, consciously, without resistance. That's the only way to stop being afraid of it. That's the only way to reclaim control, because pain, when embraced, becomes transformation. And that transformation begins the moment you stop asking why they left and start asking what this is trying to teach you about who you really are. 2. The vanishing act, disrupting their expectations. They expect you to react. Let that sink in. From the moment they walked away, whether with tears or silence, drama or detachment, they assumed one thing above all: you would chase. That's the default script. That's what most people do. They reach out, they explain, they beg for closure, they try to prove their worth one last time. But what happens when you don't follow the script? What happens when you simply vanish? No text, no reaction, no story views, no digital breadcrumbs left behind. Your silence becomes more than absence. It becomes a storm inside their mind. Because the human mind is wired for pattern. It anticipates behavior. And when the expected pattern breaks, it creates cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort that demands resolution. That discomfort, that's your power. Stoic relationships begin here, in the place where you do not feed their need for control. Because let's be brutally honest, control is the game being played. When they leave and expect a response, they are still trying to hold the reins. They want to feel that their absence has weight, that you are orbiting around the memory of them, that even if they're gone, they still matter to you. But when you vanish, you deny them that narrative. You become an anomaly, something they can't pin down, can't understand, can't feel confident about. And that is unsettling. Why? Because control brings comfort. Predictability means power. And when you disappear, you rip that power away without ever lifting a finger. But make no mistake, this isn't about manipulation. It's about detachment. It's about no longer being an actor in a play you didn't write. Think of it this way: most people, after a breakup, keep themselves tethered through technology. They check stories, they post to get noticed, they hope for a like, a message, a sign. But what does that say? It says you still care what they see. It says you're performing, still waiting to be chosen. That's not stoicism, that's slavery. True detachment comes when you stop needing to be seen by them at all, when you don't watch their stories because it no longer matters what they're doing, when you don't check their page because your time is worth more than scrolling through a life that excluded you, when you don't reach out because you've already chosen peace over answers. That kind of silence, it's not weakness, it's war. A quiet, disciplined war you wage within yourself. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, you sharpen your edge. Every moment you sit with your emotions instead of projecting them, you reclaim power. And believe this, they notice. They always notice. Even if they don't say anything, even if they pretend not to care, your silence is screaming. It says, I don't need you. It says, I've moved into a new phase, one where your presence is no longer central. That kind of stillness is magnetic, mysterious, and mystery is a key ingredient of attraction. You see, what they expect is drama. They expect late-night texts, angry rants, emotional breakdowns. That's what feeds their ego. That's what reassures them that they were valuable. But when you don't give them that, when you vanish completely, you force them into an internal dialogue they can't silence. Why hasn't he texted? Does she not miss me at all? Did I misjudge their feelings? These questions grow louder with time, and the more disciplined you are, the more haunted they become by the absence. The silence turns into a presence. Your absence becomes the ghost in their room. And that's the paradox. You don't chase, yet you become unforgettable. But let me be clear. This isn't about winning them back. This isn't about playing games. This is about removing yourself from a dynamic that no longer serves you. Because if they walked away, they made their choice. And the moment you accept that choice fully, without protest, without noise, you become something rare, something grounded. In Stoicism, this is the essence of self-command. You do not beg the world to make sense. You do not ask others to validate your pain. You stand alone, with integrity, and let life unfold. And here's the hard truth. Some people leave thinking they can always come back. They think the door will remain open, that your heart will stay parked where they left it. But the Vanishing act changes that narrative. It says, that door you walked through, it closed behind you, and that scares them. Not because they loved you deeply, not because they suddenly realized your worth, but because the power dynamic shifted, and now they're not sure how to reach you. You've become something they can't predict. And that uncertainty, that silence, it lingers longer than any message ever could. That's the beauty of Stoic relationships. You don't play petty games. You don't post thirst traps. You don't try to make them jealous. You simply remove yourself and let your absence do what your words never could. And the best part? You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. Every time you choose silence, you're protecting your energy. You're giving yourself the space to heal without interruption. You're cutting the cord that kept you emotionally entangled. And slowly, without even trying, you begin to transform. Because silence isn't just a tactic. It's a discipline. It's a ritual of letting go. And the longer you stay silent, the more clarity you gain. You begin to see them not as who you wanted them to be, but as who they were. You stop romanticizing the past and start reconnecting with your present. And the present is where all your power lives. Think about this. What happens when you don't need them to miss you? When you no longer care whether they regret it or not, you become free, truly, deeply free, because their actions no longer determine your self-worth. Their attention no longer holds you hostage. That's what it means to vanish, to not just disappear from their timeline, but from the mental trap that kept you stuck. And once you reach that point, there's no going back. You won't crave closure. You won't need their apology. You'll realize that the silence was never about them. It was the space you needed to remember yourself. So the next time your hand reaches for your phone, the next time you feel that pull to check in, to see if they noticed your absence, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what would the strongest version of me do right now? And choose silence. Every single time. Because every time you choose silence, you choose you. And when you choose you consistently, you rise. And when you rise without needing anyone to witness it, that's when the universe responds. That's when the pain begins to dissolve. That's when your energy becomes magnetic, but you no longer need to attract, because you've already arrived. You've already become the person you were meant to be. That's the true vanishing act, not running, not hiding, but evolving so silently that even you don't recognize yourself at first. And by the time they notice, it's too late. You've outgrown the version of you they once left behind. If you're still here, still listening, still breathing through the ache, know this: you are further along than you think. You are not lost. You are becoming, and the silence you keep today will echo tomorrow in ways you can't yet imagine. Now, if this message spoke to your soul, if it helped you see the strength in your silence, then like this video, drop a comment below and write number 1 to show you're ready to stop chasing and start mastering the art of detachment. And make sure to subscribe, because we're just getting started. Your evolution is only beginning, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. 3. The trap: why most people fail here. This is the moment where most lose the battle, not because they're weak, but because they were never trained to face silence. You see, silence isn't just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. When they leave and nothing fills the void, your mind rushes to create meaning. And in that frantic search for understanding, most fall into the trap. They start justifying, rationalizing, inventing reasons to stay tethered. Maybe if I just talk to them. Maybe they didn't mean it. If I remind them of the good times, they'll come back. But those thoughts are not clarity. They're cravings, emotional withdrawal symptoms from the addiction of attachment. And when you're in that state, you'll do anything for one more hit, just one more text, one more call, one more moment of recognition. But here's the hard truth that Stoicism doesn't sugarcoat. The moment they left, they had already decided. Long before you even noticed the distance, they were detaching. Long before they said the words, their heart had wandered. And now you're trying to negotiate with a decision that was made in silence, carried out in shadows, and finalized with absence. That's the trap, believing that more effort can change a mind already made, that words can revive attraction already dead. That logic can override emotion. But relationships aren't equations, they're currents. When the current shifts, you can't argue the water back into place. You either swim with it or you drown in resistance. Most people, they drown, not in heartbreak, but in the fear of being alone, of being wrong, of being left behind while the other moves forward. That fear is what drives desperation. Desperation to fix, to prove, to plead. And desperation is the fastest way to destroy respect. You see, the moment you beg, you confirm their belief that leaving was the right decision. You validate the very story they told themselves to justify walking away, that they were outgrowing you, that you needed them more than they needed you, that they had the power. So when you call, when you text, when you show up, you're not showing love, you're surrendering your dignity. And dignity is what makes you magnetic. Dignity is the quiet confidence that says, I am worthy whether you stay or go. Lose that and you lose yourself. But if you hold it, if you resist the trap, you become rare, because the trap is universal. Every person who's ever been left knows it, the trembling hands hovering over the keyboard, the anxiety before pressing send, the obsessive checking, the impulsive need to just feel seen. And that's exactly why resisting it is powerful, not just to them, but to you. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're not just proving something to them, you're proving something to yourself. That you can hold the fire without being consumed by it, that you can sit in uncertainty without reaching for false comfort, that you can face your fear of abandonment and still stay rooted in who you are. And when you do that, something changes. Inside, you stop being reactive, you stop being the victim of your thoughts. You become the observer. You begin to notice the patterns, how your mind tells you stories, how your emotions pull you towards sabotage. And once you see that, you become sovereign. Because now you're not just in the pain, you're learning from it. That's what Stoicism offers, not a way to avoid suffering, but a path to transform it. Stoic relationships are not about avoiding emotion. They're about meeting it with mastery, and that mastery begins the moment you see the trap and walk the other way. Most won't. They'll text, they'll apologize, they'll cry over red receipts, but you don't chase what left. You don't argue with silence. You don't beg for attention. You observe the fire and let it forge you, because fire doesn't only burn, it refines. And this moment right now is refining you into someone they never expected. Someone they never imagined they'd lose. But to become that person, you must first make a decision. To choose your self-worth over their return. To choose your silence over their validation. To choose your future over your past. That is the decision most never make. That is why most fail. But if you're here, if you're still reading, still breathing through it, still sitting in the weight of your own becoming, then you've already begun to rise. Because the trap can only hold those who need answers. You're done needing, you're done explaining, you're done being predictable. And as you walk past the trap, you begin to see clearly. It was never about getting them back. It was about getting yourself back. And now that you've started, there's no turning around. The old version of you, the one who chased, who needed, who waited, is dissolving. And in their place, something new is forming, something unshakable, something free. Or the pivot, channeling pain into growth. This is the moment everything shifts, not because the pain disappears, but because you stop running from it. You face it. You look at yourself in the mirror, swollen eyes and hollow chest, and you whisper something you've never dared to believe before. This pain will not destroy me. That's the pivot. Not when they reach out, not when they regret, but when you stop trying to change what happened and start changing what happens next. Most people remain trapped in heartbreak for months, sometimes years, not because the other person had that much power, but because they never learned to redirect the pain. They stare at photos, scroll through memories, read old messages like sacred texts. They replay conversations in their minds like it might make a difference. But it doesn't. Pain does not disappear through analysis. Pain transforms through action, and that's what Stoicism teaches us. Pain is energy, and energy, if not channeled, will consume you. But if you learn to use it, it becomes your fuel. So ask yourself, what if every moment you spent thinking about them became a moment spent building yourself? What if every tear was a rep at the gym? Every sleepless night became a step toward your purpose? What if your heartbreak became your blueprint for greatness? Because here's the truth, no one is coming to save you. Not them, not time, not closure. The only thing that changes your life is you deciding that this chapter will not end you. It will define you. This is the pivot, the moment you stop trying to attract them back and start becoming someone they wouldn't even recognize. The man or woman who doesn't just survive the heartbreak, but becomes more powerful because of it. And this isn't about distraction, it's about transformation. It's about going to the gym, not to impress them, but to rebuild your strength. It's about reading, learning, creating, not to show them what they lost, but because you finally realize you were never meant to stay the same. They left, that's the trigger. But what happens next, that's yours. And once you realize that, the shift is irreversible. You start waking up with purpose. You start moving with discipline. You stop waiting for their message and start crafting your mission. You turn off the noise. You stop checking their profile. You put your phone down and pick up your life. And every single time you do that, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And slowly, day by day, you become untouchable. Not because you're hiding your feelings, but because you've integrated them. Because you've taken your pain and used it to build armor, not to wall yourself off, but to walk forward unafraid. That's what Stoic relationships are built on, not dependence, not validation, but a shared power that starts within. And if they couldn't meet you there, then they were never meant to stay. Because the version of you that's emerging now, that version doesn't beg, doesn't settle, doesn't break at the sound of silence. This version rises. Every hour you once spent obsessing over what they're doing becomes an hour spent becoming who you were meant to be. And yes, some days will still hurt. The memories will sneak up on you. But pain is not the enemy. Stagnation is. Sitting still in the story of what was is the slowest death. But you are moving. You are breathing through it, walking through it. You are becoming. And one day you'll look back at this pain and realize it woke you up. It forced you to choose, continue playing small, or rise into someone unrecognizable. And that's the secret no one tells you. Heartbreak isn't the end, it's the doorway. And on the other side is everything you've been too afraid to step into: discipline, focus, peace, power. That's what the pivot gives you. Not revenge, not attention, freedom. Freedom from needing them to complete you. Freedom from tying your worth to someone else's recognition. Freedom from the fear of being alone. Because you're not alone. You're in the best company you'll ever have. Your own. And when you finally see that, everything else fades. Their opinion, their silence, their choices. None of it matters anymore because you've made yours. You've chosen to rise, you've chosen to build, you've chosen to channel every ounce of pain into purpose. And in doing so, you become something most people never find, a human being at peace with their past and on fire for their future. So if this part hit you, if you're done being stuck, done reliving old chapters, done waiting for someone to notice your worth, then it's time. Like this video, drop a comment below and write number 1 to claim your power in this moment. And if you're serious about turning your pain into your purpose, subscribe now, because the next steps in your journey are coming, and I promise you won't want to miss them. 5. The Unshaken One, Indifference as the Ultimate Power. There comes a moment, after the fall, after the silence, after the transformation begins, when something incredible happens. You stop caring, not in a cold, bitter way, not in the jaded, I'll never love again sense, but in the quiet, grounded power of true indifference, a kind of stillness that doesn't need to prove anything, a level of presence so anchored in self-worth that nothing they say or don't say can shake you. This is not something you force. You can't fake this kind of indifference. It arrives after you've done the inner work, after you've screamed, into pillows, journaled your soul out, and sat with yourself through nights that felt endless. It arrives not when you stop feeling, but when you no longer allow those feelings to dictate your identity. And that's the highest level of emotional power. Indifference is not numbness. It's not suppressing what you feel. It's observing it, honoring it, and then letting it pass like weather through the sky. You see, when you no longer crave their reaction, you finally see things clearly. The illusions fall away. The stories you told yourself about who they were and what you meant to them dissolve. And what's left? Reality. Unfiltered, raw, honest reality. And in that reality, you realize something profound. They were never the center of your life. You just made them that. You put them on a pedestal, handed them the remote to your peace, and waited for them to validate you. But that was never love. That was dependency dressed in romance. And Stoicism has no space for dependency. Stoic relationships are rooted in mutual respect, not emotional hunger. When that respect is broken, when someone walks away without explanation, or with cruelty or carelessness, then your only duty is to return to yourself. And when you do that with full commitment, indifference rises like a tide. You no longer look at their profile. You no longer wonder who they're with. You no longer care if they're thinking of you, because their attention is no longer your currency. Your energy is. And when your energy is focused inward on growth, discipline, self-mastery, there's simply no space left for their ghost. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to forgive them prematurely either. You simply move on, quietly, powerfully, completely. And that is what breaks them, if it ever does. Not your anger, not your cold shoulder, but your complete indifference. Because the world expects you to care. Our culture romanticizes heartbreak, celebrates suffering in love, tells you that missing someone is a sign of deep feeling. But Stoicism says no. Stoicism says that true strength is emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel. And when you embody that, when you move through your days with calm presence, when you no longer seek their approval, when you stop waiting for closure, they feel it, not because you tried to show them, but because energy is real. And when someone who once needed you suddenly no longer does, it unsettles them. It forces them to question their grip on your life. But by then, it's too late. You've stepped into a new paradigm. A life where your emotions are not hostages to someone else's choices. a life where your mind is your own again. That's the quiet power of the Unshaken one. You are no longer the version of yourself that reacted to every emotional trigger. You are no longer fighting battles that don't belong to you. You are no longer chasing people who walked away from your heart like it was disposable. And here's the paradox: they notice most when you stop trying to be noticed. Because people expect to be missed. They expect to be longed for, especially when they were once the center of your world. But when you become indifferent, you communicate something without saying a word. You've moved on, not just in action, but in essence. And that is unteachable, that is unforgettable, that is unshakable. But here's the part no one tells you. Getting to this level takes time. It takes brutal honesty. It takes nights of loneliness, days of emotional withdrawal, and a kind of discipline most aren't willing to practice. Because indifference doesn't come from pretending not to care. It comes from caring enough about yourself to stop chasing what harms you, from choosing your peace over their presence, from prioritizing your values over your impulses. And when you make those choices consistently, something amazing happens. You become magnetic. Not because you want to be, not because you're trying to attract anything, but because stillness has gravity. People feel drawn to someone who is no longer performing for affection, who doesn't flinch at rejection, who stands alone and smiles, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. And that alignment, it's everything. It's what makes you walk into a room and not look around to see who's watching. It's what helps you sleep at night without replaying old conversations. It's what lets you build your future without dragging your past with you. And ironically, that's often when they return. Not because they've changed, but because they no longer recognize the version of you they left. Because you're no longer wounded, no longer waiting, no longer asking questions that have no answers. But here's the final piece of the puzzle. When you reach this point, you won't want them back. Not out of pride, not out of bitterness, but because the man or woman you've become would never accept what you once tolerated, would never lower your standards just to feel chosen, would never dim your light for someone who walked away from your fire. That's the real victory. Not proving your worth, not getting them to regret, but becoming someone who is so aligned, so stable, so whole, that their opinion becomes irrelevant. And the moment their opinion becomes irrelevant, you become untouchable. So don't seek indifference, become it. Not through force, through focus, not through spite, through self-respect, because once you arrive here, there is no return. You've crossed the threshold. You've stepped out of the emotional battlefield and into the sanctuary of self-ownership. And in that space, nothing can shake you, not silence, not rejection, not even love. Because love, when it comes again, will not be a craving. It will be a choice, made from overflow, not emptiness. That's the gift of Stoic relationships. That's the power of indifference. And you are already becoming the Unshaken one. 6. The return, when they notice the shift. And then it happens, subtle, quiet, seemingly insignificant, a like on an old post, a view on your story, a message that says nothing important but everything in tone. They've noticed the shift, the change, the silence. They've felt it, creeping in like cold air through a cracked door they thought was forever closed. You didn't expect it, maybe, or maybe you did. Maybe you knew that one day they'd turn back, only to find you weren't standing where they left you. Because that's what always shocks them. Not that you moved on, but that you became someone new in the process. This is the return, not your return to them, but theirs to the version of you that no longer exists. They're reaching for a ghost. The old you, the one who used to text first, who used to wait for their reply, who used to break inside every time they pulled away, that version has been burned to ashes. And what remains is unrecognizable. Stoicism isn't about suppressing that realization. It's about embracing it fully, with clarity and grace. They're not coming back because they suddenly see your worth. They're coming back because the version of you who needed them is gone, and that loss unsettles them more than your love ever did. You see, people expect the door to stay open. They expect to walk out and find you still standing there, patient, loyal, unchanged. But time and silence, when used wisely, are not empty spaces. They're laboratories for transformation. And you didn't waste a second. While they were out chasing novelty, you were chasing mastery. While they were distracted by noise, you were refining your signal. And now, you're not a memory, they are. They don't reach out because they care in the way you once hoped. They reach out because they've lost their grip. The emotional control they once had over you, the ability to evoke a reaction, to stir insecurity, to trigger longing, it's gone. That's what Stoic relationships create. A dynamic of freedom. You are no longer tied to their return. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing who gets access to your energy, choosing who aligns with your vision, choosing who deserves the new peace you've built. And this is where most people fail. This is the test. They see the return as a victory. They rush to respond. They revert to old patterns. But you do not revert. You do not bend. You do not become small to make them comfortable. Because the person they are reaching for no longer lives here. And if you entertain them out of nostalgia, you betray your evolution. This isn't bitterness. This isn't revenge. This is remembrance. Remembering the nights you cried alone, remembering the moments you were ignored, remembering how they walked without looking back, not to hold a grudge, but to hold your standard. You've worked too hard to return to what broke you. That message they sent, it's not an apology, it's a test of your growth, a probe into your stability. They want to see if the door creaks open when they knock. But your door, it's fortified now, not locked, not cold, just selective, and selection is power. Stoicism teaches us that power lies not in control over others, but in control over the self. You don't need to reject them harshly. You don't need to respond with arrogance. You simply respond with alignment, or not at all. Because what matters now is not their interest, but your intention. Why would you let someone back in who only wants the version of you they remember, not the version you've become? And this is where you rise above ego, above pettiness, above performance. You don't have to prove you've changed. You don't have to display your growth. Your energy speaks for itself. Your peace radiates without noise. Your silence is louder than any declaration. And as they watch you now, calm, focused, detached, they start to feel the regret. Not necessarily because they love you, but because they no longer have access to you. And that access was their illusion of power, but you've reclaimed it. Every boundary you've set, every moment you chose not to react, every day you poured into your own becoming, it led to this. You've become the version of yourself that doesn't chase what walks away. You let them go, and in doing so, you let yourself grow. That's why Stoic relationships are so powerful. They're not built on fantasy, they're built on foundation. If they return and the foundation is gone, they'll feel the difference. And that difference, it's not a weapon, it's a mirror they weren't prepared to look into. Because now they see someone who no longer waits, who no longer needs answers, who no longer seeks closure. Because you gave all of that to yourself, you became the source. And when you become the source, they can no longer siphon your energy. They can no longer feed off your desire. They can no longer manipulate your emotions. Because you are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And choice is the final evolution. When you can choose, silence over reaction, stillness over drama, distance over desperation, you are free. Not from them, but from the part of you that once believed you weren't enough without them. That's the part they're trying to reach. That's the version they're hoping is still alive somewhere in your messages, in your memory. But that version has been laid to rest, not with anger, with honor. Because that version served its purpose. It broke so that you could be rebuilt. It clung so that you could learn to let go. It waited so that you could learn to walk away. And now, you are untouchable. Not because you're hard, not because you're bitter, but because you are whole. And wholeness doesn't chase fragments. So when they come back, and they will, you'll know. Not by how fast your heart beats, but by how calm it stays. You'll feel it in the space between your breath. You'll feel it in the clarity of your choices. You'll feel it in the silence that no longer demands explanation. That is your proof. That is your power. That is your pivot. So if this message resonated with where you are, if you felt the return and realized it no longer holds the weight it once did, then you're not alone. You're stepping into the highest form of self-respect, not answering to your past. Like this video, drop a comment below and type number 1 if you're ready to keep growing beyond the reach of the old you, and make sure to subscribe. Because what comes next is not about them. It's about stepping fully into the person you were always meant to become. 7. The Stoic choice, the ultimate power move. This is where the story truly turns. Not because they came back, not because you got closure, but because something deep within you finally clicked. You don't want them anymore. And it hits you not as a sharp realization, but as a steady, calm truth, one that sinks into your bones and redefines everything. You don't hate them. You don't wish them pain. You just don't crave their presence anymore. And that's where real power lives. Not in anger, not in performance, but in the absence of need. This is the Stoic choice, the ultimate power move. Not because it looks impressive on the outside, but because it changes everything on the inside. They come back thinking the game is still in play, that you're still the same player, holding the same hand, hoping for the same ending. But you're not even on the field anymore. You're not waiting for them to notice. You're not counting the days since their last message. You're not building your life around the hope that they just might mean it this time. Because the version of you who used to do that has grown out of that cycle completely. Not out of pride, out of truth. Because the truth is, the man or woman you are becoming would never settle for someone who walked away once, who treated you like an option, who believed they could leave and be welcomed back with open arms. That version of you, the one who would shrink themselves to be chosen, is gone. And in their place stands someone who knows their value so deeply that no amount of sweet words or rekindled attention could shake their sense of self. That's the final test. When the door opens again, not by your hand but by theirs, do you walk back through it, or do you walk past it? Most people fail here. They confuse the return with redemption. They believe that their power lies in being wanted. Again, but Stoicism teaches us otherwise. Stoicism teaches us that the only real power is mastery over desire, especially the desire to be wanted by someone who once discarded you. Because what are you really saying if you take them back without question? You're saying their absence didn't matter. You're saying your growth was just a waiting game. You're saying you were only becoming so you could be chosen again. And that is the deepest betrayal, not of them, but of yourself, of your effort, of your progress, of the pain you turned into wisdom. When you let them back in too easily, you erase all of that. You undo the months you spent building just for a moment of emotional validation. But the Stoic choice is different. The Stoic choice is to stand at that open door and feel no need to enter, to hear their message and feel no urgency to reply, to know that just because someone returns doesn't mean they've changed. Often they haven't. They've just realized they can't access you anymore, and that loss of control feels like affection. It's not love, it's ego. And you can't build a future with someone who returns out of ego. You build with someone who never left, who chose you even in the hard moments, who respected you enough not to test your absence. And if that's not who's at the door, then you don't open it. You don't slam it shut either. You just walk on, quietly, calmly, powerfully. That is the Stoic path. The ability to let things go without drama, to release the past without resentment, to choose yourself, not because it feels good, but because it is right, because self-respect is not a feeling, it's a standard. And once you raise your standard, there's no going back. You begin to see how much you once settled, how often you accepted breadcrumbs and called it love, how many times you betrayed your own needs just to keep someone else comfortable, but not anymore. Now, your energy is sacred, your presence is earned, your time is invested only where there is mutual growth, and anyone who shows up from the past is simply an echo, not an invitation. You don't owe them access, you don't owe them proof that you're better now, you don't owe them the softness you spent so long reclaiming. You owe yourself the loyalty you once gave away too freely. That's what Stoic relationships are built upon. Not just passion, not just connection, but unwavering inner alignment. And if someone doesn't meet you there, then love isn't enough. Not the way you used to define it, not the way they still might, because love without respect is manipulation, and attention without commitment is noise. And you are done being distracted by noise. You are done being lured by temporary warmth. You are done confusing nostalgia with compatibility. The Stoic choice is the hardest one to make because it offers no applause, no romantic climax, no cinematic ending. It's a quiet decision made in solitude, rooted in clarity. It's choosing to close a chapter with your head held high and your heart intact. It's walking away not because you're cold, but because you're awake. And that's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it final. When they come back, they're not expecting this. They're expecting the old dance, the emotional push and pull, the spiral of hope and regret. But you're not dancing anymore. You're walking straight, and that straight path, that unmoved center, that deep knowing, it's not just powerful. It's liberating. It sets you free not just from them, but from the version of you that used to need them. That's the real evolution. And once you've tasted that freedom, no relationship that threatens it will ever feel worth it again. So, you smile. Not because you're pretending to be okay, but because you are, genuinely, authentically, stoically. You've come through the storm not hardened, but refined. And you carry that refinement with you into everything you do. In how you speak, in how you move, in who you allow into your space. You're no longer here to be chosen. You are the one who chooses. Not with bitterness, with discernment, not from fear, from abundance. You know now that you never needed them. You only needed to remember who you were before you forgot. Before you bent, before you broke, and now you're whole again, maybe for the first time, and they are simply a part of the story, a chapter that shaped you, but no longer defines you. You read it, you lived it, and now you've closed the book, not with anger, with peace. That is the Stoic choice. That is the final power move. And once you make it, you never have to prove your worth again. You simply become it, quietly, steadily, unshakably. And now we arrive at the truth that was waiting for you all along, not hidden in their return, not buried in closure, but rising from within you. You were never losing them. They were losing you. The story you thought was about heartbreak was actually about revelation, because it wasn't just about someone walking away. It was about who you became when they did. And when the silence settled and the dust cleared and you stood there alone for the first time in what felt like forever, you finally saw what Stoicism had been trying to teach you from the very beginning. You are not broken. You are not lacking. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are whole, entire, solid. And it's in that realization, not in revenge, not in resentment, that your transformation completes itself. You've burned the old version of you to the ground, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. It's the you are version that overgave, that overexplained, that overanalyzed every text. The version that chased what was never secure. That version served its purpose, but it no longer serves your future. And from those ashes, something stronger has risen. Someone with clarity, with composure, with presence. Someone who doesn't just attract, but commands. Not through noise, but through stillness. That's the untouchable man. That's the essence of Stoic relationships, where power isn't about how many people want you, but how few can shake you. You see, they didn't just leave a relationship. They walked away from someone who was about to evolve, someone who no longer needs their validation, someone who has reclaimed control, not over them, but over himself. And in that control, everything changed. Because now they are just a name you no longer say, a lesson you no longer need to relearn, a memory that no longer hurts, and the life you're stepping into. It's built on the foundation of everything they underestimated: your strength, your discipline, your ability to let go. Not everyone gets to walk this path. Not everyone survives the fall. But you did. And if you're still here, reading this, breathing deeply, standing tall, then you know you didn't just make it through. You came out unshaken. You came out unstoppable. You came out untouchable. And if this message reached the part of you that needed it most, if something inside you is finally ready to stop looking back and start building forward, then take this moment and claim it fully. Drop a comment below and say, "I am the prize, I am the power." Let that be your vow, your affirmation, your next beginning. And if this journey has guided you, if these words have reminded you of your strength, then go ahead. Like this video, subscribe for more Stoic strategies to sharpen your mind and strengthen your soul. And share this message with someone who needs to remember who they are. Thank you for walking this path. Stay strong, stay stoic, and never forget who you are becoming.